Senator Taylor, how are you?
I am great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing
Good.
well. We we're connecting today because you are on Ag and Mineral, the committee, correct?
Agriculture and Resource and Environment. Yes.
Resources, not minerals. You know what I screwed that up with? Rick Stover is on the Energy and Minerals Resource, and
Yes.
the minerals resource has been like stuck in my head for the last week. So again, not that ag and other stuff. So bottom line is Idaho has, I mean, it's called the gem state. Like we're sitting on a lot of resources and minerals and just natural wealth that is very hard to attain. I mean, either through, timber harvesting or mining or things of that nature. And it's hard to attain, not just technically, right? Like, because you have to use advanced equipment, but you also have to appease environmentalists. We have reclamation ordinance, I believe, which is essentially like you can take stuff out, but you have to return it the exact way you found it beforehand, kind of like Scout's motto style. You have management with endangered species like the grizzly bear, right? Like, I mean, you have this huge timber area around there. And I was actually speaking with Director Miller from the Department of Lands this morning. And it's like, listen, when you have grizzly bear habitat, you want to reduce, or they have reductions in roads, which not only leads to less timber harvesting, but also it's very difficult to manage fires with it. So like we have all of these problems flowing around this wild land that is super rich with all kinds of wealth that we need to figure out some way to manage and use to Idaho's benefit. How are we doing that?
Right now, we're not. But
Okay.
you're absolutely correct. We are sitting on a wealth of minerals, right? What we need to do is figure out how to get those, how to extract, and how to do it responsibly. Idaho, with our potential for wind, our potential for solar, we've got great hydro, we have gold, we have antimony, we have phosphate.
Yeah. Antimony, by the way, I don't mean to interrupt, but antimony is
no.
used in military munitions. So, and China, I believe it's China and Russia are our biggest suppliers of antimony right now. And China, I believe, had made noise about cutting off our supply of antimony from them. This is one of the critical resources that the Speed Council is looking to address, which is, look, if we have a critical component of our military munitions called antimony that is controlled by an adversarial foreign nation, like that can cut us off at any time, that's a bad idea. Like, yeah, we need antimony like yesterday.
Yeah, we do. Question is how do we get it? Do we have the federal government come in and say it's a military asset, we're going to take it over and not have any say? Or as Idahoans, are we going to help with the permitting process and make sure that resource gets extracted correctly and basically done in a way that's not going to end up hurting the state? So that's what we need to, we need to be at the forefront.
I was not aware that there's this tension between the federal government saying like, hey, this is essentially, they like claim eminent domain, essentially, where it's like, we're going to grab this thing because we really, really need it. And we need it for our defense. I was not aware that there was a tension between the federal government saying that they'll come in and then us making the regulatory environment favorable enough that private industry would come in, that obviously we could control a little bit more than the federal government. Is that, am I assessing that correctly?
No.
Okay.
There isn't any tension between the two.
Okay.
It could be a possibility.
Okay. So these are two options on the table.
These are a couple
okay.
options on the table. I would prefer that the natural resources in Idaho are handled, developed, extracted, however you want to word that, in a way that Idahoans are at the table in the first place. So if we want to put, Lava Ridge is a great example.
Yes.
It came in and basically said, Idaho, you're a bunch of dumb people, we're going to go ahead and do it. And then
the Bureau of Land Management at the federal government level.
And,
right.
and LS Power. And
yeah.
Idaho said, hey, no, wait a minute, let's talk about this. And now we know where Lava Ridge stands. What that has done is other companies that have come in now have said, hey, you know what? Let's talk to the communities first. Let's talk to the people of Idaho. Let's find out a little bit about them, what their values are, what makes them tick, what makes them unique. And let's work with that to try and get these projects to move forward. And that's what I think we need to be doing with our wind energy or solar energy, any potential hydro, any mining that we have going on. We have, it's such a cumbersome permitting process right now. I'm trying to think, Perpetua spent 20 years trying to get the permit for their stibnite mine. That's 20 years.
That's a long time.
That's a really long time. So this day and age, it's the 21st century. Mining isn't what we grew up with. I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 42.
Yeah,
a solid 42.
We're not out there, with dynamite blowing things up and just making a mess and tearing up the landscape and taking what we want and leaving it. Mining has gotten to a point where it's very scientific, and the people who mine understand the importance of what they're doing, how it's affecting the economy and the ecology, and they want to leave things as good or better. And they kind of have this bad rap and rightly so, from all of history and the way mining has been happening.
Right.
I'm messing with your mic.
It's okay. It's okay. Well,
it's there are responsible ways to do things, and either as Idahoans, we can be at that table and make sure it's done responsibly, or we can come in after the fact and say, hey, wait a minute, how come it wasn't done this way? So I would prefer us to be on the front end, not the back end.
So your argument is really like, listen, we need to be at the table in the planning process, because theoretically this is going to happen one way or another, right? Like if we say, hey, we can stop this forever, then you get something like Lava Ridge, where the federal government comes in and they took community testimony and they took, community feedback and ignored all of it. there was not a person in the state of Idaho who wanted Lava Ridge. But the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, said, hey, we need clean energy. We are going to issue this permit. They're going to make this solar, solar farm that's going to pump the energy to Southern California. That's it. That's all there is to it. And again, that was working at the federal government level, where it's like, oh my gosh, there's not even they're taking public comment, but they're not listening to anything anybody's saying.
Exactly.
So your idea is essentially like, look, these are things we're going to have to square with, like antimony. We need antimony. And, like cobalt is a very popular one that people talk about. With the Jervois mine, I'm not French, but I always call it Jervaux, and they're like, Jervois, man. Fine, whatever, in the salmon watershed. But we need to take advantage of our resources. And it sounds like, it's like, look, one way or another, they're going to be tapped into. But if we don't make the path one that includes, better permitting processes and working with the private industries, it's possible that we won't have any say at all.
Exactly.
So the speed council is obviously one thing that the governor brought forward to say, like, hey, let's get all of the interested parties together as far as permitting processes and reporting processes and all of this stuff. Let's get these people all together, get everybody talking, and figure out, like, okay, do we have redundancies here? Do we have, duplicate reporting? Do we have all of these different requirements that we don't necessarily need? Or can we work as a team to streamline this so we go faster through it? Not that we're skipping steps, not that we're, rubber stamping anything, but how can we get this to be done in a way that does not take, for instance, 20 years for something like that? What else do we have on the table to address? Or what other ways can we affect a speedier permitting process?
I think that the speed committee is going to address the issues you just brought up, Matt, and that is, how do we, what redundancies are there? What are the roadblocks? And as far as Idaho goes, I'm not sure what else there is we could be doing at this time. I think that that's part of the reason why the governor decided to create this committee. On the federal side, that's, I think, where the bog down will continue to happen, because you have all the different studies that need to be done. But I think once those get moving on the Idaho side, if we are more streamlined, we can be ready and go, okay, great, let's get A, B, C, and D in place, so that when the federal government and their regulations have been met, we can go straight ahead.
Gotcha. Here's a question for you. Shifting away from minerals and harvesting and those natural resources, when we're looking at ag, okay, we lead the country in some industries, like the dairy industry. I think we're top, one of the top in the country, but we have these real struggles with labor forces around ag, and especially this. So if you have a classic, like let's say potatoes, okay, so for somebody trying to explain to somebody, it's like, okay, we grow potatoes and we rely very heavily on like H-2A workers, which are people that come from out of the country and come in for a growing season and, you know, plant and harvest and all the things, right? Yeah. And then when it snows, they go home, right? Hopefully somewhere warmer than here. And then they come back when, like, you know, it's growing season again. Yeah. Totally fine. The problem is that's not the only industry in ag. We have industries of ag like dairy, which do have no growing season. It's like you got a cow, you're milking that cow every single day without fail. And right now, the only way to get a 365 work visa is to get a green card, which is like a 20-year waiting process. That the last revision towards this work program was apparently in, I believe, 86 through the Reagan administration, where they brought in people that had been here in an unauthorized manner working. And they're like, okay, there's a path for like you to be here and permanently working. And I'm not 100% sure with all the details, but since 1986, there hasn't been that transition and reintegration of people that we're relying on for labor. So the dairy industry in particular is one that it's like, okay, we need consistent year-round labor, 365. And there's no work visa process like with potato that will fulfill us, right? So it's just like really they have to patch together things, and it's one of the industries that has a higher percentages of an unauthorized workforce just because they need people here all the time. They can't just do like a 6-month growing season. What can be done in Idaho to address this?
We're going to have to look at the federal government and reassess the way the H-2A visa program is set up. Lengthen it if need be. If I'm correct, I think it's either a 6-month or a year. There are some areas where they can stay for up to 3 years. But that constant turnover, it doesn't help the dairy industry very much. It doesn't help any industry because you're constantly training. Somebody has to be doing all that paperwork to make sure that everything is okay. And now throw on top of that, you know, our new administration back east and the threat of ICE coming in and getting rid of everyone. So now you have a workforce that we need desperately, because without them, our dairy industry and our ag industry will fall apart. And that's the backbone of Idaho. And now they're all worried about, okay, if I go to work, am I going to get caught and thrown out? I'm not a criminal. But I'm here. Hang on. I'm here on an H-2A visa.
Oh, sure, H-2A visa. Well, then they're not going to get thrown out.
Is that going to stop them? Well, so this is the thought process going on.
I'm sorry. Can I just understand? Are you saying that people that are here legally with H-2A visas that have not overstayed their visa are concerned that they're going to be deported for literally no reason?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Is there a precedent? Is this happening?
I don't think it's happening, but it's that overall mindset of
it's
fear.
It's an anxiety. Gotcha.
So it's a prevailing. We're in this country. Yes, we're on a visa, but with the uncertainty that we're faced with every day right now, if I was in that position, I'd be very uncertain too. It wouldn't matter if I had a visa or not. I would be very, very nervous. So
gotcha.
But the H-2A visa program needs to be looked at and addressed so that we can keep workers here, make them feel safe, and we're not gonna find anybody else to do that kind of work. So
gotcha.
We need to make it comfortable and like I said, safe, so that they can come here and do. Yeah, I mean, if it's bad enough where they live that they want to come here and work on a dairy, we should be saying thanks.
Well, I think people come here to work for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that it's always like people are escaping persecution, right? Like it could just be, for instance, like if you look at the exchange rate, I mean, I believe that when you're dealing with an H-2A visa, you have to apply for it in your home country, and then you have to be transported from your home country by the employer to the place of work. You also have to be housed, and I don't think they're required to feed you, but I think they are required to house you. And the minimum I think they can pay is like $17, $18 an hour. So if I'm living in Mexico on a ranch, which is like fine, I have my ranch in Mexico. I'm actually Mexican, believe it or not, but like it's like my grandfather's buried down there. But say I'm living in like Magdalena, and I'm like, okay, well, the exchange rate on $17 an hour is pretty favorable. And they're going to house me. So I have no housing expense. I just buy food. And yeah, like the work is hard. And I go and I work for, 8 months and come back. That doesn't sound that terrible to me as far as like, oh, it's so bad there that they want to do this. Like that doesn't seem like that worst possible option for people.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't like the idea that like, I don't want people to be taken advantage of. I always assume that people operate predominantly under what serves them best. And it's like, well, maybe this is just like, this is the way the, cookie crumbles.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
No.
Yeah.
Here's a different question, but related to farming. There has been a concern in the last couple of years that foreign adversarial governments are acquiring our ag lands. And there is some precedence, if you like layer maps of the United States with one like military installations, and then you layer on, foreign ag land ownership, then it's like there's some correlation between like, okay, the closer it is to a military installation, the more likely foreign adversarial governments own farmland around there. I believe it was Representative Hill talked about, or don't quote me on this. I was probably talking to him about it, but there was a bill, or I think he was thinking of running a bill regarding making it illegal for foreign governments to own our ag lands. Is that something that's being looked at or considered?
I believe you're correct that there is a piece of legislation that's coming forward addressing that yet.
Oh my God, I got one right.
That's all I can say about it because I haven't actually looked at it yet.
Is that something you're worried about in general? Or is it like on your radar?
It's on my radar, and I don't want to sound paranoid, but
I don't think you have to be paranoid to say like, yeah, we shouldn't let governments that don't wish us well to like own our ag land. Like we need to eat, whether or not they like us or not, we need to eat. Like that's not paranoid.
No, that's not paranoid. What do they do with that land? Do they, if they buy that land and they don't want it to be farmed, they don't want it to be ag land, they shut it all down, then what do we do for food?
Oh, sure.
So
doesn't China own Syngenta? Like
they do.
Yeah. And isn't that like our emergency seed reserve?
I know. Yeah.
They deal with like our critical seed supply.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So like this isn't paranoid. China owns our critical seed supply right now today. This isn't like, and you can say, oh, they're not going to do anything. But like an average person be like, that may be true, but could we just like not have them own that? Like, is there a way for us to do that?
There probably is a way for us to do that.
Yeah.
And like I said, Matt, there is legislation that is out there. I haven't looked at it yet. So
gotcha. We should talk again once it comes out because I'm really interested about this. You know who else talked about this? Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil. This is really funny.
Does he still talk?
Yeah, he does. He's like way into it. And so I think it must have been Representative Hill that I was talking about this with last year, because Dr. Phil went on Rogan and brought up this very point, and Representative Hill had been talking. Yes, I remember it now. He had been talking about it as like a real problem, and people have been like, that's, people kind of blowing it off as like, oh, that's kind of, and then Dr. Phil appears is like, oh no, this is a problem. I can't do the Dr. Phil accent, but like you can imagine in the Dr. Phil voice, he starts talking about how, foreign adversarial governments are buying up our ag lands, and they're setting up installations, close to military sites, and either using it for observation purposes or just shutting down ag land completely, which would be a problem. It's like, you can't force a farmer to farm, and you can't force a property owner, at least at this iteration of law, to like, harvest their land. That's bad news bears. So we'll have to revisit this one.
Yeah, I would like that. So
yeah. We've talked about mineral harvesting, we've talked about ag labor, we've talked about protecting our ag lands. What are other things on the radar for the ag committee?
Boy, you know, it's been actually a fairly slow year in the Ag Committee, which kudos. I think that's
that.
good.
Look at that.
The quagga mussel, if you want to get down to it, that's something that our committee deals with.
It's 1:30. Isn't it going on today? Isn't Director T-Wall?
She and now I can't remember his name. They were both in committee. Nick is his name. They came in and gave us a great presentation about what they have been doing in the second round of chelated copper treatment on the Snake River, and wonderful presentation. So from the agricultural side, what our Department of Ag is doing addressing that particular threat has been it's phenomenal. You look at the rest of the country, and within 2 weeks of the first villager sighting, I say that it was probably with a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
But they were doing a treatment. There were 21, I believe, different agencies between state and fed that got together and worked hand in hand and said, let's make this work. And unbelievable to have that many agencies come together and do what they did. We're not out of the woods yet. The second treatment they've done, we won't know until the water heats up. So we're looking at maybe August, September, July, somewhere around in that area, when those villagers will start to produce again. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. But on the agricultural side, if you think about it, if that particular species gets out of control, our irrigation pumps are going to be messed up. When you talk about hydropower, anything, not necessarily the turbines, but all the associated piping and everything like that.
Yeah, getting the water to the turbines.
All of it.
It's gone, like gonzo.
Gonzo,
yeah.
Exactly. So that's the big key thing that a lot of people don't really realize can affect our agriculture, but it will, and it could. So kudos again to our Department of Ag here and what the director T-Walt did. It's a Herculean effort, and it's amazing. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
I would love to have the director on. I didn't know anything about the quagga mussels, and then I'd seen rudimentary kind of like PSAs, and I was like, whatever. And then somebody told me, like, oh, she's like living on a boat, like every day. Here's like the director of the Department of Ag, and it's like she's doing absolutely everything she can along with all these other people. And then I learned about how just absolutely horrific it is to, again, the irrigation and just everything. Like your canals are covered, like all the recreation's gone. You have like razor blades on the bottom of the Boise River. Like it's terrible, right? And that scene. And so again, I got educated then. I was like, oh, I'd love to have her in. So I shot her a text, and of course she's living on a boat. I'm like, oh, she didn't respond. I was like, of course she didn't respond. She's working. She's like saving the state.
She's working. So
yeah.
And she would cook breakfast for her crew every morning, if I'm correct, before they would head out on the river. Man. She'd be down there cooking breakfast. So
I'm a big bacon and eggs guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what she cooked, but yeah, great effort from, and again, 21 different agencies.
Yeah. That's wild.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, Senator Taylor, we've talked about a bunch of things. I know it's a working day. I appreciate you coming in. Let's do this. I would love to revisit the ag land ownership when that bill comes out, if you'd be game, or if other bills come out that surprise you. Again, obviously working with the federal government and trying to hash out a resolution for our labor force to make sure we have consistent labor in both construction and both in agriculture and things of that nature is really important. But also, just who owns Idaho? We're already in a wrangle, to some degree with the federal government over the management or mismanagement, depending on who you're talking to, with our public lands. And, the idea that outside interests could then be owning our lands too is a difficult thing for me to swallow.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because the federal government owns about 61% of Idaho.
Yeah.
If the state wants to take over that 61% it can't afford to manage them, which is where we end up with that potential of losing those lands. If you can't afford it, then you're going to have to sell it. And then you sell it to the billionaires, or whatever. Right. And then we as Idahoans lose access to our hunting, our fishing, our recreation, everything. The private landowner, what's in it for them if we go out and hunt? They're going to charge. They're going to whatever it is. These lands are ours, and whether they're managed or mismanaged depends on how you want to look at it. Depends on how you want to categorize management. There are lands. Everybody in America owns those lands, and it's not right, in my opinion, for Idaho or Utah or any state to say, we're going to take those lands away from you and do with them what we want, because they're our lands. And there it is. I'm a hard no on getting rid of our public lands. So
if there was a mechanism by which there would be sufficient funding, are you against categorically Idaho owning them if we had enough money being generated from that ownership? Because we get PILT right now, which is payment in lieu of taxes. Yeah. So there's an assumption made that everybody agrees with that, hey, if Idaho actually owned these lands, they would make money off these lands. Now, it's a very small amount of money, right, that we get from the federal government in PILT money, but there is the capacity to generate revenue through more effective timber harvest, through better mineral resource harvesting, all these things. And again, I don't know the number, so I'm not saying we have enough. But if there was a way that it penciled out where it's like, okay, hang on a sec, it's going to cost about $500 million to do this. If we got these lands, we could generate sufficient income from these lands in this responsible manner to own them and manage them in the way Idaho wants to do it. And we could guarantee or have some strong guarantee of multi-use, right, for hunting, fishing, grazing, recreating, whatever it might be, and generating them. Is that, and again, this could be like a total fairy tale situation where it's like, that's never going to exist. But if that did exist, if it penciled out, are you against categorically owning them? Or are you just saying, hey, in the current iteration with the information we have available about our capacity to make enough money to manage them, it doesn't pencil out?
It doesn't pencil out. I don't ever see how it could pencil out. And I would hate to rely on the state saying, yes, we'll give you access to these lands when we already have access, constitutionally embedded access to these lands right now. So no, the state, we have our endowment lands. Let's work with those. Let's let the federal government continue to manage or mismanage, again, depends on how you want to look at that 61%, and keep it open for all of us.
The thing I worry about, though, is like the nuclear cloud, the mushroom cloud that I saw from my house over the summer. I had if you look at the interviews from like June and July and August and even like September, October, it sounded like I had been smoking a pack a day, not wolves, but cigarettes, all day, every day. And here it is. I was in my studio and I had like a HEPA filter running and everything. I was just like, it sounded terrible. And that's because we had these gargantuan, like crazy fires. Right. And I spoke to Dean Cameron, the director of insurance, last week or the week prior. I can't remember which one, but the point is that he was saying, like, listen, these fire seasons are here to stay. Yeah. Like, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do to stop these fires. And that means that we're going to have exaggerated fires on federally managed lands and on, state endowment lands. Fantastic. And Idaho itself manages, although we have roughly 2.5 million acres of state endowment lands, we manage roughly 9 million acres of land as far as fire prevention and protection. But, like, how do we navigate this? Where it's like, well, listen, at some point, if they're mismanaged enough, then there's a quality of life question for Idahoans like me. And I'm sitting, I survived. Like, all right, I'm not saying I didn't survive. I'm still here. But at what point, is there a point when we say, hey, look, this really isn't working? Like, is there a point when you could say, all right, look, categorically, I view this as mismanagement. We should figure something out.
Let me ask you a question in response.
Senator Taylor, are you answering a question with a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to be clear what's happening here. Now, mind you, I'm going to give you a terrible answer because I'm an idiot. So, like, just tone down your expectations here.
I'm the one on your show. So
Okay.
who's the idiot? Do you think that Idaho has the resources to fight a fire that would take over on all the federal lands that we have right now and do it adequately? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the finances?
Let me ask you a question.
Are you going to answer my question that I answered your question with?
This is double. You can't double skip
Okay.
a double snap. Am I supposed to assume that we have our current iteration of finances, or the iteration of finances that Congressman Fulcher articulated once we gain ownership or slowly roll out ownership of private? Because what you're saying is like, okay, on today's dollars, Matt, I got you. Because on today's dollars, we don't have the manpower or the resources to do this.
Yeah.
But the argument isn't that we have sufficient today. The argument is that we would have sufficient if we slowly accumulated federal lands and then rolled out mining and harvesting and utilization projects that were enterprise projects and did return revenue. So if you're asking me today's dollars right now, if we take over all of the federal lands, no. But I don't think anybody's making the argument that we have enough today. Right? What the argument that's being made is, what if we accumulated 10% of these lands every 5 years? And every 5 years, as we slowly grab more and more of them and sufficiently integrate, mineral harvesting, timber harvesting, multi-use recreation and things of this nature, and then continue taking care of those. And then over a period of 50 years, we have successfully set up industry and enterprise engagements that fund it. That's the question. So let me ask you, would that work?
I don't see how it would.
Okay. That's a great answer then.
There you go.
There we go. We finally, 12 answers later, or 12 questions later.
Yeah. Plain and simple. I just don't see how that would work.
Got it. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not telling you it would. I'm just saying that there are some people that feel it may. And you know what? Honestly, I hope whoever's right wins, because I really love that we have these public lands. I was talking to somebody just yesterday about the aggregation of lands that have access to our public lands being accumulated by wealthy people. So again, you have, say an access road up, as is the case up in the McCall area, where you have an access road to this wide swath of public lands. And the land that access road exists on gets purchased by somebody, and they shut down the road to public access. So now you have this billionaire who has purchased this swath of land and then terminated access to the public, there was only one access road. And so he purchased this land, but now all of the public land is only accessible by horseback or helicopter in or something. That's not good, right? We need to maintain access to our state public lands. I don't know how you fix that problem, but I'm not a fan of losing this stuff either.
I think you might have answered your original question.
No, because it doesn't factor in the downfall of my everyday life when we have a nuclear mushroom cloud and I'm dying. Because I got the black lung like in Zoolander. That doesn't solve the problem.
Wildfires, they're here to stay.
Oh, sure.
And I think personally, and your next guest might differ with me on this one a little bit. I was classically trained for structure fire, cross-trained in wildland firefighting. Since around the early 1900s, all we have done is when we see a fire in the wilderness, we go and we put it out. We stop it. And now if you look at our forests, what we have been doing is preventing what nature normally takes care of. And now our forests are not very healthy because we haven't let nature do what it's supposed to do, which is why we end up with these big mushroom clouds. So we have nobody to blame for ourselves for kind of this position that we're in. If you want to talk about, I won't use the big double C word, but we're having some temperature rises throughout.
The double C, I was
the climate change.
Cross-pollen, that's a CP? Yeah.
We have climatic challenges that we're faced with right now.
Sure.
And we also have encroachment on the wildland-urban interface,
right?
Where we have municipalities who let people build up hillsides, up canyons where there's no way out, up, everywhere, where all we are doing is exacerbating a potential problem. So when those fires do happen and that heat starts to move and it starts to go uphill and it's drying everything out in its way so that when the wind comes, it's just a tinderbox ready to go. But at what point do we as a society say, hey, let's think about where we're going to let people build. Let's think about how we're going to manage our forests, how we're going to control this or that or the other thing. So to say that mushroom cloud isn't going to be there if Idaho takes over all of its lands and has the money to fight the fires are still going to be there. We're still going to have those mushroom clouds. It's up to us to figure out how big those mushroom clouds are going to be. So do we go in and responsibly harvest the dead wood that we have out there and make use out of what we can with it and thin out our forests? And that's a whole other story because you've got a whole other group of people to deal with on that one.
We got to go to the Department of Ag because, we got to work with them. So you go from the Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior to the Department of Agriculture because, train wreck.
And so when it comes to the mismanagement, I think there's been a lot of mismanagement in a lot of different areas. And we can do, but we're smarter than that. We should be anyway. And Mother Nature was around a lot longer before than we were. And she knows what she's doing. And we need to maybe get back to trusting her a little bit more. But in the meantime, we need to figure out how we can help her so that we can get back to coexisting in a wonderful, ideal world. How's that for...
I don't trust Mother Nature gave us Ebola and anthrax. Like Mother Nature is this crazy chaotic force that we're like beholden to in the most upsetting, vulnerable. Like I don't trust that. Like the boom and bust cycle. Like my stepmom grew up in Montana in like the Glasgow area. Her dad, my like step grandpa, was a fish and game warden for Montana. All right. And they would watch the deer population from like year to year explode and then die. It exploded. And it's like these boom and bust things that happened. And she told me that several times they would like drive down these roads with these long, like barbed wire fences. And the deer population, when it will get really big, there wasn't enough food for them to make it through the wintertime. So they got like super weak. And she said there would be hundreds of deer hung over the barbed wire. They had jumped over and their back legs caught and they were stuck there and they weren't strong enough to like wiggle off. So their hindquarters on one side, their fronts on another side, and they just die and they are strung up, just dying. And she was like, it's so hard, man. Like she's a hard lady for seeing. And she's like, yeah, like, but what are you going to do? Like, you can't stop the deer population. They would overpopulate it and then a bunch of them would die. And then like only the strongest would make it through the winter. And then like there would be slow years and then this ramp up and then you'd have this mass population. Then they die again. It's like, that's Mother Nature. I don't want that for you. I don't want it for me. I don't want it like, no, we need to let the entire state of Idaho burn. And then like, what about Matt's house? Like, oh no, Mother Nature selected that one.
It's just, she selected that. But while you brought up Ebola,
I did.
and the bad diseases. Maybe Mother Nature's trying to thin out humans.
Oh my God. I'm not on board with this one. Listen to me, Senator Taylor.
I'm just throwing that out there for fun,
I hope she picks the right people. Listen to me. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in. Let's talk more on this because again, like this, and again, I'm just curious about what we do with this problem. I hear what you're saying and your sentiment, which is like, there is no way that this pencils out, is a very, very common sentiment. And, again, speaking with Congressman Folger, I was like, maybe there is a way. And I don't know. I was just saying like, maybe there is a way to like slowly roll this out. But again, that's up to him to prove to people and definitely not me.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think, incumbent upon him to reread our Constitution that says that those are our lands. And before he wants to start rolling them out, maybe he should check with all of us.
No.
So,
well, the ballot initiative is a little under fire. So I don't know if we're going to be able to check with everybody anytime soon. So just a thought.
How many times do you want me to come back?
It's fantastic. Listen to me. Thank you for coming in, sir. We'll do it again.
Matt, thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course.